The rain in Seoul fell heavily, as if trying to wash away an ancient sin hidden in the city's shadows. From the heights of Gangnam, the reflection of the buildings shimmered on the soaked asphalt, while the sound of sirens mingled with the shouts of reporters crowding before a mansion shrouded in mystery. On the glass facade, the sign of Kang Corporation, it flickered, oscillating between brightness and collapse, as if even the name that symbolized power was about to fade away. Inside, Kang Jun-ho, the untouchable tycoon, observed the chaos with the same coldness that had made him feared. His eyes reflected not the crowd, but the very abyss he had helped to build. No words, no gestures, only the silence of a man who seemed to carry something far heavier than a simple accusation. Outside, the entire country watched in shock as the headline ignited social media and news outlets. CEO Kang Jun-ho is accused of keeping his wife in captivity. The cameras didn't miss a single movement. The audience watched the empire crumble in real time, while flashes transformed the fall of Korea's most admired man into a national spectacle. Inside the house, the scene was one of abandonment. Torn curtains, a broken frame, a photo of a smiling couple frozen in time. The absence of the woman, Han So-yeon, the voice of the missing wife, it was more deafening than any scream. As the mansion gate opened and Jun-ho faced the crowd, a new image began circulating on social media. A woman walking, barefoot through the snow, wearing a white coat that contrasted sharply with the blood on her hands. The video was anonymous. No one knew where it came from or when it was recorded. But one question ignited the country, a question no one dared answer. Could that woman be the missing wife? And what really happened inside that house where even the walls seemed to hold secrets? If this story has already got your heart racing, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapters. Because what comes next will surprise you even more. Before the name Kang Jun-ho, even if he had become synonymous with scandal and cruelty, he was the personification of modern triumph. Born in Daegu, the son of a factory worker who dreamed of stability, Jun-ho grew up believing that emotions were weaknesses and that love was merely a luxury for those who could afford failure. His trajectory was a relentless climb. The brilliant student who became the youngest CEO in Korea, the man who transformed every defeat into calculation and every affection into distraction. In magazines, he was portrayed as a genius and visionary. In real life, as someone who never learned to be touched. It was at a charity event that their paths crossed. Han So-yeon, a painting teacher whose gaze held a serenity he would never know, was exhibiting an enigmatic painting, a blindfolded woman trying to reach her own reflection. Intrigued, Jun-ho asked why she couldn't see herself. So-yeon calmly replied, "Because sometimes seeing yourself hurts more than remaining blind." That simple poetic phrase wounded him silently. It was the first blow to his pride, and the first invitation to the feeling he would spend years trying to control. The romance blossomed beneath the guise of perfection. Expensive dinners, flowers without notes, promises of eternity that sounded rehearsed. So-yeon saw a lonely man trying too hard to be strong. He saw in her the mirror that revealed what he didn't want to see. They married in front of cameras and flashes, and the country crowned them as the symbolic couple of Korean elegance. But behind the glass walls of the mansion, the silence grew like an invisible crack. Over time, love turned into routine, routine turned into control, and control turned into fear. She feared losing him. He feared being discovered. And so, between luxury and emptiness, tragedy was born. Because before Korea saw him as a monster, So-yeon knew him as a man. And that's what will make their downfall even more unforgettable. After all, how far does love go when power decides what should be felt? As the months passed, the house that once echoed with laughter and music became a temple of silence. The gleam of the marble walls, the flowers changed weekly, the imported perfume she left in the hallways, nothing was enough to fill the growing emptiness between them. Kang Jun-ho now arrived late, spoke little, and looked even less. When he spoke, it was only to correct. When he looked, it was with distance, and when he smiled, it was at someone who wasn't her. So-yeon began to notice that the absence wasn't just of bodies, but of souls. The man who once observed her with curiosity in front of a painting now passed by her as if walking through a glass wall, aware that something was there but unwilling to touch it. At dinners, the clinking of cutlery became louder than words, and the only remaining dialogue was the sound of the clock, marking the time she wasted trying to save him from himself. In the business world, Jun-ho flourished. He was invited to give lectures, received awards, and was praised for his strategic coolness. They said he made decisions without hesitation, without emotion, without fear, as if that were a virtue. But no one imagined that the same coolness that made him triumph in executive circles was also turning him into a man of stone at home. He had become incapable of feeling, and worse, he was proud of it. One evening during a gala, the contrast between them became evident. She, in a simple dress, remained in the shadows, while he circulated among businessmen and cameras, staging the image of the perfect husband. When someone asked why she seemed so quiet, he replied with a polite but cruel smile, "My wife prefers silence. It's the only artistic talent she possesses." The comment, said lightly, pierced So-yeon like a blade. No one noticed, but in that instant, her love began to die. And when love dies, silence changes shape. It is no longer just absence, it is resistance. Back at the mansion, So-yeon began to withdraw into herself. She spent hours in her studio trying to paint something that made sense, but the colors seemed to lose their life in her hands. The red turned gray. The blue transformed into empty white. Art, which had once been her way of understanding the world, was now a reminder of what she was losing. Jun-ho, on the other hand, interpreted her silence as weakness. He thought she was bowing down, when, in reality, she was just observing. He began to control her more rigidly, from the clothes she wore to the places she could go. "The CEO's image begins with his wife," he would say, without realizing that each word was a brick in the wall that separated them. But there was something new in So-yeon's expressions, something he didn't understand, a look too calm for someone who felt oppressed, a serenity that sounded like a threat. He confused submission with obedience and didn't realize that. Behind that serene countenance, a silent force was growing, the same force that would one day destroy everything he believed he controlled. And it was in this routine of indifference that their emotional empire began to crumble. Not with shouts, but with silences. Not with public betrayals, but with the slow assassination of intimacy. He still slept beside her, but he was already light years away. And she, who once loved him for seeing something human in him, now saw only the shadow of the man he pretended to be. The outside world applauded his coldness. But at home, she learned to tolerate it and to transform it into fuel for something yet to come. Because all coldness, sooner or later, finds a mirror capable of reflecting it back. And when Jun-ho looks at himself in that mirror, he will discover that ice also burns. Kang Jun-ho's empire grew in proportion to the way his heart became a windowless fortress. With absolute power, fear became his only advisor. He no longer feared losing. Money or influence, but something far more intimate, control. And what threatened him most, ironically, lived within his own home. Han So-yeon, once silent and docile, was beginning to become the mirror reflecting what he most hated to see, his own humanity. She tried to talk, to seek a fresh start, but each attempt ended with the coldness of his words and the dry sound of a door closing. The love that had once been shelter was transforming into an emotional prison, until a subtle rumor spread. Through the corporate gossip columns, Korea's most powerful CEO was facing a marital crisis. An unconfirmed headline was all it took for Jun-ho to feel vulnerable for the first time in years. The following morning, the man who ruled empires lost control of himself. He entered her room with a crumpled newspaper in his hands, his eyes a mixture of anger and dread. "Did you talk to anyone?" he asked softly. So-yeon, exhausted, replied with cutting serenity, "Not everything needs to be said to be heard, Jun-ho. Sometimes silence is enough to scream." That phrase wounded him like a confession, and what could have been just a misunderstanding turned into the beginning of his ruin. Driven by fear, he ordered, "No one enters, no one leaves." The imprisonment began, not in basements but in marble corridors. The windows closed, the telephones disappeared, and the luxury of the house was transformed into a scene of confinement. Jun-ho said it was to protect the marriage. But the truth was, he was trying to hide from his own failure. So-yeon's imprisonment was a mirror of his cowardice. While she learned to resist in silence, he lost himself in guilt and paranoia. For no one imprisons love without becoming a prisoner of their own fear. And when So-yeon finds the key, the whole world will hear the sound of Kang Jun-ho's downfall. The hours inside that house were no longer counted by clocks, but by the sounds that the silence allowed to escape. Each distant step of Jun-ho echoed like a cruel reminder that she was no longer a wife. She was a hostage to a name, a reputation, and a fear that was not hers. Han So-yeon, locked inside cold walls and sealed windows, she began to realize that love, when it becomes a prison, doesn't die suddenly. It rots slowly until nothing remains but the smell of loneliness. At first, she still hoped he would come back to the room, apologize, explain that it was all a misunderstanding, a phase, a passing storm. But the days turned into weeks, and the only sound coming from the door was the metallic clang of the lock turning. The man she loved seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone who exuded arrogance and slept peacefully amidst the fear of others. So-yeon wrote in old notebooks, not to remember, but to endure. Her words were fragments of a mind trying to stay alive. He thinks the world is a mirror, but the mirror broke, and I'm still here, looking at the pieces. Sometimes she talked to herself, other times she cried silently so as not to give him the pleasure of hearing her weakness. The walls heard confessions that no human had the courage to listen to. Time began to distort. The sunrise seemed the same as the previous day, the sunset a copy of the last. She marked the days by scratching the sides of the easel, like prisoners do in their cells. Painting was her only way to breathe. The canvases began to change. Where before there were flowers and soft colors, now appeared female faces covered by veils, eyes blindfolded, mouths sewn shut. Art became the cry that Jun-ho could not silence. One night, the mansion's generator failed for a few minutes. For the first time, the darkness didn't frighten her. The darkness was freedom. She approached the window and, gazing at the garden, illuminated only by moonlight, swore to herself that if she ever left, she would never again bow down to anyone. It was in that instant that something inside her broke, and something new was born. On the other side of the house, Jun-ho watched her through the internal cameras. He saw her pain and yet felt no guilt. In his gaze, there was only calculation. "She'll forgive me when it's all over," he murmured to himself, as if love were a debt that could be paid with time. But time there was not an ally. It was the judge. So-yeon began to collect small things, a pen, a handkerchief, a piece of wire, small symbols of resistance. She didn't yet know how, but she felt that destiny was beginning to move, and within each silent night there was a subtle noise, the sound of courage being born where fear once reigned. Her eyes, once filled with tears, now shone with something he would never understand, the certainty that no one remains imprisoned forever. Love, when betrayed, doesn't disappear. It transforms. And So-yeon's transformation would be the most beautiful and devastating form of justice he could ever imagine. She sat on the floor, leaning against the cold wall, and whispered as if praying, "You took the world from me, Jun-ho, but the world will listen to me." And fate patiently listened, because even locked up, So-yeon had found the only way out he could never control, the look of someone who has already decided she will survive. And when that look turns outward, the prison begins to crumble from within. The nights grew longer, and time seemed to stand still inside that silent mansion. The closed windows kept out the outside wind, but couldn't contain the heavy air that accumulated inside. So-yeon woke and fell asleep to the same sound, the echo of distant footsteps, the creaking of wood, the pounding of her own heart trying to stay strong. And amidst this scene, something began to change. Resignation gave way to a strange lucidity, the awareness that if she stayed there, she would disappear not only from life, but from herself. One early morning, as the rain lashed against the roof, a different sound broke the silence, the soft clinking of the lock. The house's security guard, an elderly man who saw the sadness in her eyes daily, hesitated before the door. He knew that if he helped her, he would lose his job, perhaps more than that. But So-yeon's gaze that night didn't plead for pity, it pleaded for courage. With trembling hands, he slowly turned the key. "Come on, before you change your mind," he murmured. She didn't answer. She simply took the white handkerchief she had kept under the pillow and tied it around her neck, as if it were an amulet. She left silently, with light. Steps, avoiding the sound of the old floorboards. Every meter covered was a battle against fear. When she reached the main hallway, she looked back one last time. The dark house, the wedding portrait on the wall, the memory of the man who swore to love her and ended up turning love into punishment. As she opened the door, the icy morning wind hit her face. The air smelled of freedom and fear mixed together. So-yeon crossed the garden barefoot, feeling the cold earth beneath her feet, and the sky, for the first time in months, seemed to breathe with her. At the gate, he hesitated for a moment. The world outside was immense and unknown, but any destination was better than the gilded prison he had left behind. He ran as if trying to reclaim his own life. Minutes later, the security cameras recorded the emptiness. Jun-ho woke to the alarm and went downstairs like a man who had realized, too late, the magnitude of his loss. On the monitor, the frozen image showed only the half-open gate and the white scarf clinging to the fence, trembling in the wind, the symbol of escape, the silent signature of a woman who no longer belonged to him. Newspapers reported Han So-yeon's disappearance the following morning. No official statement was made, and the CEO refused to comment. "Personal matters," said his advisor. But on social media, the story spread. Rumors, assumptions, theories. The disappearance of the wife of the most powerful man in the country fueled an insatiable curiosity. Jun-ho tried to maintain control, but his apparent calm was a disguise. For the first time, the coldness that had always saved him began to crumble from within. He still believed she would return. That fear would bring her back. But he didn't understand that fear, when exhausted, gives way to something far more dangerous: freedom. The police began to investigate discreetly. The bodyguard who had helped her left the country days later. The press found out, and the story, previously whispered, began to turn into a public scandal. His name, synonymous with power, was now spoken with suspicion. The doors of the Kang Empire began to creak, and as the sun rose over Seoul, a new chapter of the tragedy unfolded on screens and in the hearts of millions watching. The world wanted to know where Han So-yeon was, and when the first image of her surfaced on social media, a woman walking alone barefoot in the snow, the whole of Korea stopped. Because that wasn't just a picture of an escape, it was the beginning of a revolt that no one could contain. Han So-yeon's escape spread like wildfire. Within hours, Korean social media became a popular field of investigation. A low-resolution video began circulating, the woman in a white lab coat crossing a deserted street, barefoot, the wind pushing her hair against her face. The caption read, "She escaped from the house of the most powerful man in the country." The short and enigmatic video was enough to ignite public opinion. Hashtags multiplied: Justice for So-yeon, the prison of silence, Kang Corporation, sob, suspicious. Within hours, the name that symbolized wealth and respect became synonymous with cruelty and cowardice. Broadcasters vied for exclusivity and news portals alternated theories. No one knew for sure what had happened, but everyone was certain of one thing. There was something rotten beneath the glitter of the Kang Empire. While the country was in turmoil, Jun-ho tried to contain the collapse. He gathered lawyers, ordered any mention of her name to be deleted from social media, and threatened to sue journalists. But the more he tried to silence her, the more the story grew. It was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. People wanted the truth, and his silence was the perfect fuel for distrust. So-yeon, hiding in a simple shelter on the outskirts of Busan, watched the headlines with a mixture of pain and astonishment. She wasn't seeking revenge. She just wanted to exist again. She still trembled at the sound of nearby footsteps, still woke with a start in the middle of the night, but for the first time, she felt something different pulsing inside her. The feeling that perhaps the suffering hadn't been in vain. That morning, she wrote one last sentence in her notebook. "He locked me up to silence me, but it was the silence that exposed him." And on the other side of the country, inside a meeting room filled with desperate advisors, Kang Jun-ho realized what it meant to lose control of his own destiny. The tide was turning, and he didn't know how to swim outside his aquarium of power, because every revolution begins with a whisper, and hers was about to transform into a voice that would echo throughout the country and destroy everything he believed to be unshakable. Kang Jun-ho's empire began to crumble with the same discreet noise that structures make before total collapse. A distant, almost imperceptible but constant noise. At first, it seemed like just an image crisis, a momentary slip that time, money, and good lawyers would fix. But there was something different this time. The people didn't want explanations. They wanted justice. The actions of Kang Corporation stocks plummeted 18% in a single week. Brands that had previously vied for the chance to partner with the company began to terminate contracts. The board of directors pressured him to step down temporarily, and international newspapers published articles with devastating headlines. The CEO who imprisoned his own wife. In the corridors of power, no one defended him anymore. The silence of his allies was deafening, and for the first time, the man who prided himself on his coldness felt fear. The same fear he instilled in the woman he locked away to protect himself. Meanwhile, So-yeon gained a face, a voice, and a cause. Women's organizations began to mention her name in protests. TV programs debated the case as a symbol of a system that for decades had protected men like Jun-ho. The public clamored for her appearance. People wanted to hear her. They wanted to see the woman who had the courage to escape the invisible prison of reputation. But she remained silent. She knew that time was now working in her favor, and the waiting became her loudest cry. Jun-ho, increasingly isolated, began to lose control over his own narrative. His mistress, who had previously accompanied him on business trips, disappeared, taking secrets and confidential documents with her. A former company employee leaked recordings of internal meetings where Jun-ho spoke about ensuring his wife's obedience. The recordings went viral, and with each new leak, his mask of perfection crumbled before millions. The streets of Seoul began to fill with posters bearing her face, not as a victim but as a symbol. The name So-yeon became synonymous with resistance. In cafes, subways and squares, the country discussed the same theme. How many more are still living locked away without the world knowing? While Korea rose up in his defense, Jun-ho sank into his own shadow. The company corridors, once filled with sycophants, now echoed with emptiness. No employee dared to look the boss in the eye. Crisis meetings ended in silence, and the reports showed the obvious. The Kang Empire, built on fear and appearances, was beginning to self-destruct. One night, returning home, he found himself alone for the first time. No security guards, no assistants, only the echo of his own memories. He climbed the stairs, opened the door to the room where she had been kept, and found everything exactly as before: the easel, the canvases, the broken frame on the floor. But now there was something different. The emptiness seemed to breathe. He felt her absence as a presence. The reflection in the mirror didn't show him the same man. His tie was crooked, his gaze lost. For a brief moment, he tried to convince himself that all of this could still be fixed. But the mirror didn't lie. And for the first time, Jun-ho understood what it meant to be trapped, not between walls, but within a name that no longer inspired respect and a conscience that found no rest. The downfall that began with rumors was now taking shape, gaining proof and consequences. Karma, patient as ever, was simply waiting for the right moment to exact its final price. And that moment would come, not in the headlines, not in the courts, but in the reunion with the only person capable of breaking the ice he himself had created. Because Jun-ho's true punishment was yet to come, and it came dressed in white. Months had passed since the collapse. The Kang Empire was now just a name shrouded in scandals, headlines, and lawsuits. Korea watched, intrigued, the slow destruction of a man who, for so long, had been treated as untouchable. But the public still awaited an apparition, that of the woman who had escaped from prison and who, with the simple act of escaping, had ignited a revolution. On the morning the trial was announced, reporters crowded outside Seoul's central courthouse. Cameras, microphones, and watchful eyes formed a human sea. And then, amidst the sound of flashes and murmurs of voices, the gate opened. A woman walked through the crowd, dressed in an impeccable white suit, her hair elegantly styled, with firm steps and a serene gaze. Han So-yeon, he had returned. There was no fear in her expression, only presence. It was as if the world, for the first time, saw her for who she truly was. Each camera flash captured more than just a pretty face. It captured the transformation of a soul that had survived hell and learned to walk on the ashes. The entire country watched, and even the most skeptical sensed that something powerful was about to happen. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere seemed thick with a silent tension. Lawyers whispered, journalists frantically took notes, and the judge observed with studied neutrality. In the center, Jun-ho. The once unshakable man seemed smaller than ever. The expensive suit didn't hide the dark circles under his eyes, nor the nervous tick in his hands. When So-yeon entered, he looked away, perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of fear. She walked to the podium without hesitation. When her voice first echoed, silence filled the room. For years, I was seen as the shadow of a powerful man. Today, I don't come seeking revenge. I come seeking justice for myself and for all the women who still live in homes that have become prisons. The phrase echoed through the room like lightning. The audience held their breath. It was impossible not to notice the irony. The man who once locked someone up to preserve his reputation was now sitting before everyone, about to be judged by the entire world. So-yeon spoke firmly, without anger, but with the clarity of someone who found strength in suffering. She spoke of the days of silence, of the fear, of the cold gaze that turned her into something. She spoke of the moment she realized that, to survive, she would need to let love die. And when she finished, she lowered the microphone without tears, only dignity. The journalists rushed to record every word, and her image filled the screens in real time. While the country gave her a standing ovation, Jun-ho, in the front row, slowly lowered her head. There was no argument that could erase what everyone had just witnessed. But what no one knew was that this hearing wasn't just about him. It was about the entire world that for so long had normalized the silence of women imprisoned in golden palaces. And there, before the judge, the public, and her own past, So-yeon delivered the final blow. She filed the formal complaint and revealed something no one yet knew: a sealed envelope containing irrefutable proof of what had happened inside that house. A murmur filled the room. Jun-ho looked up for the first time in a long time and knew that nothing could stop what was coming next, because inside that envelope was the secret that would change everything, and the recording that would transform the powerful CEO into the most feared symbol of an entire generation. The world hadn't yet heard his voice, but it was about to. The sound of the paper being torn echoed through the room like a muffled thunderclap. Everyone leaned forward as the envelope was opened. From inside, So-yeon's lawyer pulled out a small, simple, discreet silver flash drive, but one that carried the power to destroy what remained of Kang Jun-ho's image. The judge ordered silence. The reporters, attentive, prepared their cameras. And then the video began. The images trembled slightly, captured by an internal security camera. In the first frame, Jun-ho was seen in the mansion's hallway, wearing a dark suit, giving orders to the security guards. His cold, methodical voice cut through the air in the room. "No one enters this room. No one speaks to her. I don't want the press to find out. She will stay here until everything is over." A murmur of indignation swept through the audience. The lawyer paused the video for a few seconds, allowing the words to reverberate. The judge maintained an impassive expression, but his gaze betrayed astonishment. When the video resumed playing, So-yeon appeared in the images, pale, confused, trying to say something that couldn't be heard because the audio had been muffled. Even without sound, the pain was evident. It was impossible to watch without feeling the weight of the scene. At the end, before the recording was interrupted, Jun-ho approached the door and said something in a tone of voice that sent chills down everyone's spine. "Her silence is what protects me, and nobody needs to know." The video ended. For a few seconds, the courtroom was silent. And then, like an inevitable wave, the murmur grew, the flashes exploded, and the truth, the one he had tried to bury, became public, irreversible, and undeniable. Jun-ho lowered his head, unresponsive. No lawyer dared to speak. That recording was more than proof. It was a confession. The public, inside and outside the courtroom, felt the same collective chill. Power had changed hands. So-yeon didn't celebrate. She simply stood up, straightened her white suit, and looked at him one last time, not with anger, but with something deeper, detachment. Because the trial was not yet over. And fate, which was already beginning to close the circle, had in store for Kang Jun-ho a punishment far more solitary than any legal sentence could impose. The days that followed the trial were a sentence that no law could have written. The relentless media transformed the name. Kang Junhua, national disgrace. The empire he built over 20 years crumbled in less than 20 days. Investors abandoned him, contracts were torn up, and Kang Corporation. Once a status symbol, it was now remembered as the birthplace of a moral scandal that exposed the darkest side of power. Junho was convicted. The judge read the verdict in a neutral voice, but each word sounded like a final blow to his reputation. 3 years in prison. 3 years to think, the time he believed he controlled, now turning against him like a patient enemy. In the courtroom, there were no applause or celebrations. The silence of justice was the cruelest form of punishment. In the cold cell, far from the cameras and spotlights, Junho finally faced the only adversary he could neither bribe nor intimidate: his own reflection. The rusty mirror on the wall reflected back an image he barely recognized. The gaunt face, the lifeless gaze, and the suit replaced by a nameless uniform. The man who once gave orders now even asked permission to breathe the same air as the others. Sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the night, hearing footsteps, imagining it was her crossing the mansion's hallway. Other times, he would dream of the sound of the lock clicking, and a chill would run through his body as if he were a prisoner of a past that would never let him go. Outside, the world went on, and in contrast to the silence of the cell, the name Han So-yeon gained prominence in newspapers, lectures, and social movements. She spoke little, but her voice carried the weight of all the women who had learned to be silent. Junho watched the news on the small prison television and for the first time understood that her true punishment was not imprisonment. It was seeing her free. Because human punishment has a time limit, but the punishment of fate remains outside, waiting for the day he will emerge and discover that nothing belongs to him anymore. The sea off Busan was serene that morning. The waves lapped at the sand with a gentleness that seemed to respect the silence of those walking alone along the water's edge. Han So-yeon wore simple clothes, her hair loose in the wind, and her gaze sought nothing more, only peace. The sun rose timidly on the horizon, painting the ocean golden, an ocean that, like her, knew the weight of keeping secrets. Each step left a light mark, as if saying to the world, "I survived." Since the trial, his life had changed completely. From a hostage of fear, he had become a symbol of freedom. He founded the Free Light Foundation, which sheltered women who were victims of psychological abuse and domestic imprisonment. Everyone wanted to hear her speak, but she spoke little. She preferred silence, that same silence that was once her prison, now transformed into refuge. And each time she took the stage to tell her story, people realized that forgiveness was not forgetting, but liberation. No one knew for sure if Junho had tried to write to her from prison. Perhaps he had written and never sent it. Perhaps he had only thought about it. But So-yeon no longer needed answers. She understood that evil, when returned with hatred, multiplies, and when returned with dignity, it fades away. Her gaze, once wounded, was now firm. Not that of someone who had conquered the other, but of someone who had conquered her own pain. She stopped before the vastness of the sea, took a deep breath, and closed her eyes. The wind blew on her face, and for a moment, the memory of everything she had lived through passed like a silent film. The prison, the escape, the trial, the justice. And then, in a calm voice, she murmured to herself, "Some prisons have no bars, but they leave scars that time transforms into wings." The sound of the sea carried away her words, and with them, the last vestige of the past. Han So-yeon smiled, not in triumph, but in reunion. The world called her a survivor, but she knew the truth. She was finally free. And if this story touched your heart, remember, freedom begins when you find the courage to say, "Enough is enough." subscribe to the channel, and stay with us for more intense, transformative, and emotional stories like this one, because every soul that awakens changes the destiny of all others.